All right, so today we're dealing with how to solve a algebraic equation dealing with multiplying and dividing. And it's actually really the exact same way we dealt with the addition subtraction. We still need to use the inverse operation to get anything associated with the variable to cancel out. So our goal is still to isolate the variable. Our goal is still to um, get everything to cancel out that is close to the variable. So our inverse operations here are um, to undo multiply. You're going to divide. To undo division, you're obviously going to multiply. And of course, the golden rule of algebra, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. And so let's just get into this first example. So we look and see what's being done to the x. In this case, it's being multiplied by -6. So to undo that, we're going to divide by -6. Um, and that's really just going to leave us with 1x, which we can just call x, right? 1 doesn't really affect anything. So dividing anything by itself is going to turn into 1, and so that's why we're allowed to do that. So if we divide this side by -6, that's going to cancel those out or turn into just 1 essentially, but we don't need to write it. And then whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So on this side, we're just left with 1x or just x, right? And then 84 divided by -6 is negative, because we have only one negative sign here, 14. Okay, so whatever, you just do the inverse operation of whatever is being done to the x. This is another way, if you remember, to write division, right? And so this is technically saying y, and that fraction can be written as division. So y divided by 3 equals -8. Okay, and so instead of dividing by 3, we're going to be multiplying by 3. All right, and that's just going to leave us with y over 1, right? We can cancel both those out, and so all we're left with is just y over 1, which is really just y. Since we multiplied the left side by 3, we also have to multiply the right side by 3, and that's -8 minus, or I'm sorry, -8 times 3 is -24. And again, I forgot to do this up here, always can plug things back in. So if I plug -14 back in with -6, -6 times -14 does equal 84. If I plug in -24 divided by 3, it equals -8. So always a way to know if you got the right answer by checking it. All right, when you're dealing with fractions, we need to kind of remind ourselves of some fraction rules. So this is technically being multiplied, right? So 6 times x is what's happening. So we need to divide both sides by 5/6. But let's remember that we can't divide fractions. Instead, to divide fractions, multiply by reciprocal, right? So to divide fractions, you multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm really dividing by 5/6, but what that really is multiplying by 6/5, right? Because then the 6's cancel out, the 5's cancel out, and I'm just left with x on that side. But of course, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So if we remember, we can do a little bit of reducing ahead of time. 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 30 6 times. So now I'm left with -6 over 1 times 6 over 1, and I get -36. And of course, I could plug that back in. If you do that, you will end up with 30. right, same thing here with decimals, and I just put it on the right side. Doesn't really matter what side it's on. Okay. So in this case, we have, again, remember that fraction sign is division. So a divided by negative 10 equals negative 11.2. So since a is being divided by negative 10, I'm going to multiply both sides by 10. So that crosses that out, leaving me with just a. Whatever you do to one side, you of course have to do to the other side. So I'm going to multiply. I'm going to, one word pops back up here. Okay, multiply the left side by, maybe, there we go, by 10, which really just moves the decimal over one time, so I'm going to get negative 112. All right, over here, same thing now we have that fraction. So remember, you always want to kind of ask what's happening to the variable. So the variable is being multiplied by negative 2/5, so we need to divide by negative 2/5, but what that really is, or negative 2/5, but dividing by negative 2/5 is really multiplying by the reciprocal. So whatever you do to one side, do to the other, and those are going to cross out, and all you're left with is 5/1, or 5. On this side, we just left with q, because those cancel out, and I'm just left with 5 for q. It looks like a 9, doesn't it? Q. Okay? Alright, and this is not your homework for tonight. Alright, let's take a look at this problem. News program offers 24 minutes of news, which is 4 times as many minutes as commercials. How many minutes of commercials are shown during the news program? Okay, so we know we have 24 minutes of news. And we know how many times, so commercials, we don't know what that is, but we know that there are 4 times as many minutes of news as there are commercials. So if we would do 4 times the amount of commercials, we would equal the 24 minutes of news. So 4 times the amount of commercials equals the news. So how do we solve that? Divide both sides by 4. Divide both sides by 4. C equals 6 minutes. So we would get A.